The Rebel Capitalist Show.
How can we have an 8.5 CPI print and the dollar go up? How is that even possible?
Well, a lot of time. Okay, so you're right. It is good that we talk about this because this is, it's first. I will say, a year ago, there's no way the DXY is going higher, and then as the DXY started going higher, they're like, well, yeah, the DXY is going higher, but the dollar's not going higher, right? And and they'll say, well, the dollar's only going higher against other fiat; it's not going higher versus anything else. Well, now look at equities; it's going higher versus equities. Look at copper; it's going higher versus copper. Look at soybeans; it's going higher versus soybeans. But now this can all change tomorrow, right? But in general, yes, the purchasing power of the dollar over the last couple of years has fallen. It's just that it hasn't fallen as much versus the dollar, or the dollar's purchasing power has not fallen as much as everybody else's.
Right.
So we could very possibly get into a situation where we have a spiking DXY alongside very high levels of inflation. And that is actually the dollar milkshake theory.
Right.
Believe it or not. That's why I said we will eventually get into a situation where the Dow, the dollar, and gold are all rising together versus everything else. And it's because fiat is measured against each other now. And I know then here's the other thing I'm gonna address it right away.
Sure.
Is people say, well, it doesn't matter if the DXY is going higher because all fiat is losing value. It's just which ice cube is melting the slowest. And I can tell you that there is some truth to that. Yes, it is very important to understand that all fiat is losing purchasing power. But to think that you can just ignore the DXY and ignore the fact that it's the dollar melting slower than all the others is completely and utterly wrong.
Yeah.
If it was any other currency melting slower, it's not as big a problem. But when it's the dollar, which is the underlying currency for the entire world economy off of which the entire world economy is levered, the ratio of the dollar to other currencies is extremely important. Because if the dollar weakens slower than all the other fiat currencies, you will get bankruptcies, you will get defaults, you will get margin calls, and you will end up with a cascading liquidity crisis, just like we had in 2008 and 9, and just like we had in 2020. So the idea that you can just ignore it because they're all losing value is completely wrong. I'm not saying that to be right. I'm actually trying to help people. Believe it or not, it's just not me being a troll, right? I actually, the reason I do all this is I want to help people. Now, sometimes I try to do it with a little humor. Sometimes I do it with sarcasm, and sometimes I do it with a blunt instrument. But the whole goal is to help people understand how the system works and how the system is designed. And so, anyway, I kind of got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I think it's important to set that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And the argument and the pushback that you get a lot is, oh, well, Brent, the Fed is going to print so much money and the government's going to print so much money. And I think your pushback is always, well, yeah, you're right. But the BOJ and the ECB, they're going to print a heck of a lot more. And so there again, it becomes something that's relative. And for people to really get their head around kind of that concept you were just referring to, if the dollar's going up, that's a big, big problem for the global economy. If you've got a rental property, let's say just one, single family home, and your mortgage payment is, let's say, $1,000 a month for this rental property, and currently you're collecting $2,000 a month in rent. So that's great. So your rent covers your expenses. You've got some positive cash flow. But let's just say that your $2,000 in rent is not denominated in dollars, although that's the equivalent that you're getting in dollars right now. Let's say it's denominated in yen. So they're actually paying you a set number of yen per month that currently is $2,000. But if that yen goes down significantly, if it depreciates against the dollar, then when you take those yen and turn them into dollars to pay your debt, you've got a heck of a lot less dollars. So you could get to a point where the yen depreciates so much that now you only have $1,000 worth of rent coming in for the same amount of yen that your rent is priced in. And now all of a sudden you're upside down and you lose your property to the bank because you can't afford to pay the mortgage and all the other expenses that go along with it, and you go bust. And you don't pay back that loan. And then what happens to the bank? Well, if you don't pay off that loan, then that reduces their balance sheet capacity, and they might not, or they may be less willing or less able to lend more dollars in the future. And if less dollars are lent out to other homeowners, that means less aggregate demand for homes, and all home prices come down. Is that an example?
And it means less dollar supply or potentially less dollar liquidity. So you get into it all becomes kind of a vicious circle.
Right. So then the cash out refi, people can't do cash out refis, and et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So I just wanted to paint that picture, because I think that's an example that most people can relate to, but it's the exact same concept that you're talking about, but just at a global level with all these global corporations.
Right. And it's a huge problem. The world economy and the global monetary system as it's currently designed is not designed for a continuously strong dollar. It's just not. Right. It breaks the system. It will literally break the system. And so how they're going to solve it, I don't know. I think eventually the way it will get solved is, maybe we'll talk about this, but I think it's going to eventually have to be reset lower, either artificially or just because there's a catastrophic bust of some kind. But I think they're going to have to reset the dollar much lower, or perhaps just introduce an entirely new system, because it's going to be very, very hard to fix the system as it currently is.
Yeah. So the Plaza Accord 2.0 type thing.
Yeah.
How would that work? I'm sure you've given this a lot of thought. Like how would the applicable countries come together, and how would they artificially or repeg the dollar? I don't know if you want to use that term, but how would it actually work in practice?
Well, I mean, the way it typically works is the hegemon says that, hey guys, this is what we're going to do, and then they enforce it, right? But what typically what they would do is what they did in the 80s is, the Fed went to the Bank of Japan and the German central bank and the Bank of England, and they said, listen, the dollar is way too strong. We raised interest rates dramatically over the last 5 years, 6 years in order to cure inflation. And that happened, but now the dollar is very strong and it's hurting us. It's causing us to have, a recession in the United States, which, we're the king and we don't want that, right? Basically is what they said. And so they went, and so they said, we want to devalue the dollar, via these Plaza Accords, basically agreeing that, they would buy their own currencies and strengthen their own currencies versus the dollar, and let the dollar lose value over the next, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, whatever it was.
The German central bank and the Japanese bank just went out to the market, just bought yen and bought.
Essentially, yeah. I don't know the exact transactions by which they did it, but yeah, they basically,
they're getting dollars coming in from their exports, and they're like, okay, we'll just take these dollars. We'll take those and yen. That's right. That increases the supply of dollars. That's right. The supply of yen, then you have that balance.
That's right. And again, did Germany and Japan want to do that? They probably didn't want to do it, but they agreed to do it. And, and then that actually, the dollar fell significantly, and then, we got into the 90s and, the dollar had come down quite a bit, but then it started to get strong again. It went up into the 2000s, and then they had to start cutting interest rates. And then, Greenspan did a number of interest rate cuts, and, the dollar, got to, it was around 75 or something in 2007, 2008.
I think it got down to 70 actually.
Yeah, maybe down to 70. But then with the global financial crisis, the supply of dollars dried up. The dollar started to rise. That started a whole cascade of things, both in the Eurodollar market and the US dollar market. And so the Fed came in and had to do QE, and they had to, kind of flush the situation, and the dollar came. But, again, it's important to understand that over the last 30 years, the dollar has been systematically weakened, not strengthened, right? The efforts of the central bank have not been, everybody talks about the US dollar dying. Well, they're going to print so much money, it's just going to blow away into oblivion. And I get it. Fiat currency does lose value over long periods of time. But it's important to understand that the official interventions into the US dollar have always been to weaken the dollar, not to strengthen the dollar. Now, I would say, Volcker in the late 70s, early 80s, he strengthened the dollar. They went in and raised rates, in order to get the dollar stronger. But everything since then has been to get the dollar weaker, because the dollar, without, if left to its own devices, because of all the debt in the world and all the demand for the dollar, it would just continually go higher and higher. And so they have, and when it starts to break things, then they have to come in and artificially weaken the dollar. So, I think a lot of people perhaps unwittingly have this turned around in their head of what it is that the Fed is doing, right? The Fed's not there supporting the dollar. The Fed has been in there trying to keep the value of the dollar manageable at a lower level.
Yeah. When you're saying that, I'm thinking about the trade deficit. I mean, it's gone from about 40 billion to 120 billion per month in the last, 2 or 3 years, something like that. And I just think about, that is an argument for the dollar being weaker, but my goodness, if we were running a trade surplus, as an example, I mean, the dollar would be at 115, 120, something like that.
Easily.
And what happens to the global economy then? And my goodness.